The shadows beneath the runway. Jasmine Cole adjusted the brim of her official cap as she stood at her station near the security checkpoint at Maxwell International Airport. To the thousands of passengers bustling through the terminal, she was just another airport official, professional, efficient, and unremarkable. But beneath her composed exterior lay a labyrinth of secrets. Jasmine had been part of the airport's operations for nearly a decade. She knew the ins and outs of the job better than most, from the rhythms of passenger traffic to the quirks of her colleagues. But her expertise extended far beyond the bounds of legality. For the past 3 years, she had been a key player in an underground network that thrived on exploiting the very systems designed to ensure order and security. The network was intricate, involving baggage handlers, customs officials, security supervisors, and even a few higher-ups who preferred to keep their hands clean. The scams varied: smuggling contraband, sneaking luxury goods past customs, and fast-tracking travelers willing to pay handsomely for discretion. Each operation was seamless, a testament to the network's careful planning and discipline. To Jasmine, it wasn't just corruption, it was survival. A single mother with mounting debts and an ailing parent to care for, she convinced herself that this was just another job, one that paid better than her official paycheck ever could. But as smooth as their operations had been, Jasmine knew all too well that every game had its limits, and lately she'd felt the walls closing in. The morning began like any other. Jasmine arrived at her post early, greeting her colleagues with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her station, positioned near the busiest checkpoint in the terminal, was a hub of activity. Tourists lugging oversized suitcases, business travelers clutching their laptops, and families wrangling restless children all passed through under her watchful gaze. Her earpiece buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. "Heads up, Cole. You've got a priority coming through," the voice crackled. It was Marcus, one of the network's key players, and the baggage supervisor. He was the one who handled most of the dirty work on the ground. Jasmine's pulse quickened, but her face remained impassive. "Copy that," she replied, her voice steady. The job today was bigger than usual. A suitcase stuffed with unmarked bills was being funneled through her checkpoint, destined for a courier who would ensure its safe delivery to an offshore account. The operation had been meticulously planned as always. Marcus would ensure the bag made it through baggage screening, while Jasmine's role was to keep an eye on the security scanners and wave it through without incident. She spotted Marcus across the terminal, giving her a subtle nod, their usual signal. Everything was set. Jasmine tightened her grip on the radio clipped to her vest and focused on the conveyor belt as the line of luggage moved steadily through the scanner. What Jasmine didn't know was that her every move was being watched. Detective William Marshall stood a short distance away, blending seamlessly into the crowd. Tall and sharp-eyed, with an air of quiet authority, William was a seasoned investigator recently assigned to Maxwell International. Over the past 6 months, he had been quietly gathering intelligence on the corruption allegations that plagued the airport. Jasmine had been on his radar from the start, but she wasn't the only one. He knew he was dealing with a deeply entrenched network, and today he planned to dismantle it. William's informants had tipped him off about a major operation going down. He didn't have all the details, but he knew enough. His team was positioned strategically around the terminal, ready to act at a moment's notice. The suitcase arrived on the conveyor belt, indistinguishable from the dozens of others moving through the scanner. Jasmine's heart pounded, but her hands remained steady as she monitored the screen. She spotted the bag immediately, a sleek black roller with a distinctive red tag. The scanner's X-ray image showed nothing unusual, thanks to the network's expert tampering. With a practiced motion, Jasmine waved it through. Marcus was already in position. Pretending to assist a passenger, he retrieved the bag from the other side of the scanner and disappeared into the crowd. The entire exchange lasted no more than a few seconds, seamless and unremarkable to the untrained eye. But to William, it was the final piece of the puzzle. Jasmine turned her attention back to the line. feigning normalcy as she directed passengers through the metal detector. Her mind raced, but she forced herself to stay calm. The operation had gone off without a hitch, just like always. Then her earpiece crackled again, this time with a voice she didn't recognize. "Jasmine Cole, step aside." Her blood ran cold. She glanced up and saw William approaching, his eyes locked onto hers with a piercing intensity. He moved with purpose, his presence commanding attention even in the bustling terminal. Jasmine's heart pounded in her chest. She fought to maintain her composure, her mind scrambling for an explanation. Her colleagues looked on, their expressions a mix of confusion and curiosity. None of them had any idea what was unfolding beneath the surface. "Is there a problem, sir?" Jasmine asked, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling inside her. William stopped in front of her, his expression unreadable. "Step aside, Officer Cole," he repeated, his tone leaving no room for argument. Jasmine hesitated, but only for a moment. She nodded and moved away from the checkpoint, her movements deliberate and controlled. William gestured to two uniformed officers, who quickly took her place at the scanner. As they walked, William leaned in close enough for only her to hear. "We've been watching you, Jasmine. It's over." Her stomach dropped, but she didn't respond. She knew better than to speak without knowing exactly how much he knew. For now, all she could do was play along and hope for a way out. But deep down, she knew her carefully constructed world was beginning to crumble. And this was only the beginning. As the terminal buzzed with its usual chaos, a storm was brewing behind the scenes. Jasmine had always known that her double life came with risks, but she had underestimated just how high the stakes could climb. And now, with Detective William Marshall closing in, she was about to find out just how far she was willing to go to protect herself and the secrets she'd worked so hard to keep buried. The shadows beneath the runway. Jasmine sat in a cold, windowless interrogation room, the fluorescent light above casting harsh shadows on the steel table before her. She had been escorted here in silence, her mind spinning with 1,000 unanswered questions. Her hands rested on the table, palms down, fingers splayed as if trying to ground herself in the sterile reality of her situation. Across from her, Detective William Marshall leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, his sharp eyes never leaving her face. "You've got quite the operation going, Cole," William began, his voice calm but edged with steel. "But it's over. We've got enough to bring the whole thing down. Smuggling, bribery, fraud, you name it." Jasmine's heart raced, but she forced herself to meet his gaze, her face a mask of defiance. "I don't know what you're talking about." William's lips curled into a faint, humorless smile. "Don't insult my intelligence. We've been watching you for months. You think Marcus is still running around out there?" The mention of Marcus made her stomach churn, but she didn't flinch. She couldn't afford to. If Marcus had been caught, the entire network was compromised. And if William was bluffing, showing any sign of weakness could seal her fate. "You're fishing," she said evenly. "If you had something on me, we wouldn't be sitting here talking." William leaned forward, placing a thick manila folder on the table between them. He opened it slowly, deliberately, revealing a stack of photographs, documents, and handwritten notes. At the top of the pile was a grainy black and white image of Jasmine waving the suitcase through the scanner that very morning. Her breath caught in her throat. "Still think I'm fishing?" William asked, his tone dripping with quiet triumph. Jasmine's mind raced, scrambling for a way out. Denying the evidence was pointless. But admitting guilt outright wasn't an option either. She needed time. Time to think. Time to strategize. Time to figure out if there was anyone left she could trust. "If you've got all this evidence, why am I not in handcuffs?" she countered, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. William's expression hardened. "Because I want the bigger fish. You help me, and maybe we can cut you a deal. Keep stonewalling, and you'll take the fall for the whole network." The implication hit her like a punch to the gut. If she cooperated, she'd be betraying everyone she'd worked with, everyone who had trusted her. But if she stayed silent, she'd be the one to pay the price, not just for her own actions, but for the entire operation. "I need time," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. William shook his head. "Time's a luxury you don't have. Think fast, Cole." Hours later, Jasmine found herself back in the terminal, released but under surveillance. William's parting words echoed in her mind. "We'll be watching. Don't do anything stupid." She walked through the bustling crowds, her steps deliberate, her expression unreadable. Every face she passed seemed to blur into the next, but behind her composed exterior, she was cataloging everything. The location of the cameras, the presence of undercover agents, the gaps in security where she might slip away unnoticed. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, glancing at the screen. A single message from an unknown number. "Meet me at the usual spot. We need to talk." Jasmine's pulse quickened. She knew exactly who it was, and if they were reaching out now, it could only mean one thing. The network was unraveling, and the race to stay ahead of it had begun. The shadows beneath the runway. The air inside the dimly lit parking garage was thick with the scent of oil and exhaust fumes. Jasmine's footsteps echoed as she approached a nondescript black sedan parked near the far wall. She glanced around, her sharp eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of a tail. Satisfied that she wasn't followed, she tapped twice on the driver's side window. It rolled down just enough for her to see Marcus's face, his expression tense and drawn. "Get in," he said curtly, jerking his head toward the passenger seat. Jasmine slipped into the car, the door's quiet thud masking the storm of emotions churning inside her. Marcus wasted no time. "They're onto us," he said, his voice low and urgent. "William's been sniffing around for weeks, but today, he's got teeth." Jasmine crossed her arms, her face unreadable. "What happened? Did they grab the courier?" Marcus shook his head. "No, but they're closer than they've ever been. I saw one of their guys near the handoff point, pretending to be airport staff. If I hadn't spotted him, we'd both be in cuffs right now." Jasmine's stomach tightened. The network had always relied on its ability to stay one step ahead of law enforcement. But now, it seemed their carefully constructed web of lies was beginning to unravel. "Do we have a backup plan?" she asked, her voice calm despite the rising panic she felt. Marcus hesitated, and that pause told her everything she needed to know. "We're working on it," he said finally, "but we need to move fast. If they flip anyone, this whole thing goes down." Jasmine leaned back against the seat, her mind racing. She thought of William, his piercing gaze, and the folder of evidence he had laid out before her. He wasn't bluffing, and she knew it. The question was, how much did he really know? And how far was he willing to go to take them down? Marcus's phone buzzed, breaking her train of thought. He glanced at the screen and cursed under his breath. "It's Alan. They got eyes on his crew too. We're running out of time." Jasmine's jaw tightened. Alan was one of their key operatives, responsible for smuggling high-value items through customs. If he was compromised, their entire operation could collapse. "We need to pull the plug," she said, her voice firm. "Shut it all down before they can get to us." Marcus looked at her, disbelief etched on his face. "Are you serious? Do you have any idea how much money we're sitting on? How many people are relying on us to keep this running?" Jasmine met his gaze, her eyes cold and unyielding. "We can't help anyone if we're in prison. We need to cut our losses and disappear." Marcus didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stared out the windshield, his fingers drumming against the steering wheel. Finally, he let out a heavy sigh. "Fine, but we need to be smart about this. No loose ends." Jasmine nodded, her mind already working through the logistics. They would need to destroy evidence, erase digital trails, and ensure that anyone who might betray them was either silenced or convinced to stay loyal. It wouldn't be easy, but it was their only chance. "Where do we start?" Marcus asked, his voice resigned. Jasmine's phone buzzed again, pulling her attention. She glanced at the screen and froze. Another message from the unknown number. Time's up. You know what to do. Her blood ran cold. She hadn't shared her predicament with anyone. Not Marcus, not the network. The message could only mean one thing. Someone on the inside was playing both sides. First, she said slowly, her voice tinged with an edge of steel, we find out who's betraying us. Then we deal with them. The car fell into a tense silence as they both realized the precariousness of their situation. The walls were closing in and time was running out. For Jasmine, the question was no longer whether she could escape the fallout, but how much she was willing to sacrifice to survive. The shadows beneath the runway. The tension inside the car was palpable as Marcus turned the key, bringing the engine to life. The hum of the motor echoed off the concrete walls, a faint, steady rhythm in the suffocating silence. Jasmine's mind worked overtime, weighing her limited options against the growing threat they faced. We can't just wait for them to make the next move, Jasmine said, her voice firm. We need to find out exactly what they know and who they're targeting. Marcus nodded, his jaw tight. Agreed. But how do we do that without walking into a trap? William's got eyes everywhere. Jasmine hesitated, her gaze fixed on the dashboard. She knew there was only one way to get ahead of the situation, but it was risky, dangerously so. We need to reach out to our contact in the customs office. If anyone's heard whispers about their investigation, it'll be them, she said, her voice resolute. They've always had their ear to the ground, and if William's team has been poking around, they'll know. Marcus frowned, his fingers gripping the steering wheel tightly. You sure about that? Reaching out now could blow back on us if they've already been compromised. Jasmine shook her head. We don't have a choice. Sitting here waiting for the walls to close in isn't a plan. It's suicide. Marcus sighed, the weight of the situation pressing heavily on his shoulders. All right, but we need to be smart about it. No direct contact. Use the burner phone, and keep it brief. Jasmine nodded, already pulling a small, disposable phone from her pocket. She quickly dialed a number, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency. The line rang twice before a familiar voice answered, cautious but alert. Who's this? The voice asked. It's me, Jasmine replied, keeping her tone low but steady. We need an update. What do you know about the investigation? There was a pause, the silence stretching thin before the voice finally responded. Word is, they're building their case from the outside in, starting with the small players and working their way up. They've got someone in custody, don't know who yet, but it's someone close. Jasmine's heart sank. Someone close meant someone who could unravel everything. Anything else? She pressed. Yeah, they'd flagged today's operation. Whoever's leading this knows more than they're letting on. Be careful. The line went dead, leaving Jasmine and Marcus in uneasy silence. Jasmine stared at the phone in her hand, her mind racing. If someone was in custody, it was only a matter of time before the network's entire operation was exposed. Marcus finally broke the silence. What's the play? Jasmine's jaw tightened. We cut the ties that can be traced back to us. Anyone who's a liability, any loose ends, we deal with them now. No second chances. Marcus nodded grimly. Understood. But you know what that means. I do, Jasmine replied, her voice steely. And I'll handle it. Back at the terminal, Jasmine moved through the crowded corridors with purpose. Every interaction, every exchange, every detail was now a potential threat. The faces she passed blurred together, each one a possible link in the chain of her undoing. Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the unknown number. Change of plans. Meet at the service tunnel. Midnight. Jasmine's grip on the phone tightened. The service tunnel was one of the few places in the airport that remained out of reach from the surveillance cameras. If the network was calling for a meet there, it meant the situation was worse than she'd imagined. As the hours dragged on, Jasmine's mind replayed William's words in the interrogation room. We'll be watching. Don't do anything stupid. But as the clock ticked closer to midnight, Jasmine knew that doing nothing wasn't an option. Whatever was waiting for her in the service tunnel, she would face it head-on. Because in the shadows beneath the runway, survival demanded nothing less.